Alex Eala, the comeback queen who refused to lose twice. She had just become a national hero. 48 hours later, she was almost sent home in the first round. This is the story of how a 21-year-old from the Philippines turned the biggest win of her life into the biggest test of her career. And what happened next will tell you everything about who she really is. But here's the part almost nobody is talking about. Months before this match, this exact opponent had already beaten her, in almost the exact same way. Same dominant start, same collapse, same ending. So when they were drawn against each other again, only days after the biggest title of her life, everyone in that stadium was thinking the same terrifying question. Is history about to repeat itself? Stick with me to the end, because the way this match unfolded is one of the most quietly incredible displays of mental toughness you'll see in tennis this year. And if you love stories about athletes who get tested right at the peak of their success, hit subscribe now, because these are exactly the kinds of stories we tell here. Let's start at the beginning. In the summer of 2026, a name that most casual tennis fans had never heard of exploded across headlines around the world. Alexandra Eala, known simply as Alex Eala, was already no stranger to making history. Born in Quezon City in the Philippines and trained for years at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, Eala had spent years quietly building a resume of firsts for her country. She'd become the first Filipino to reach the semifinals of a WTA 1000 event, back in Miami in 2025, where she stunned Iga Swiatek in the quarterfinals before falling to Jessica Pegula. She'd become the first Filipina to reach a WTA Tour final at Eastbourne. She'd earned the first Grand Slam main draw win by a Filipino player in the Open era at the US Open. Every tournament, it felt like she was rewriting some part of her country's tennis history. Then came Wimbledon. In July 2026, Eala walked out onto center court in the third round against Iga Swiatek, the defending Wimbledon champion, a three-time Grand Slam winner, and one of the most dominant players of her generation. Nobody expected what happened next. Eala took Swiatek to a brutal, nerve-shredding first set that stretched 84 minutes, saved 2 set points along the way, and closed it out in a tiebreak, 7-6. Then she rolled through the second set 6-2. Just like that, the defending champion was out, and Alex Eala had become the first Filipino in the Open era to reach the fourth round of Wimbledon, surpassing records that had stood since the amateur era, decades earlier. Her run finally ended in the fourth round against Jasmine Paolini, the 2024 Wimbledon finalist, in a tight 3-set battle. But the damage, in the best possible sense, was already done. The tennis world now knew her name, and back home, a nation of over 100 million people had a new obsession. If Wimbledon was the moment the world discovered Alex Eala, Washington was the moment she made them believe it wasn't a fluke. At the Mubadala Citi DC Open, Eala walked into one of the most brutal single-week gauntlets you'll see on tour. Round 1, Zheng Qinwen, the reigning Olympic gold medalist. Round 2, Leylah Fernandez, the tournament's defending champion. The quarterfinal, Elina Svitolina, a former top 5 player and one of the most experienced competitors on tour. The semifinal, Naomi Osaka, a 4-time Grand Slam champion. And waiting in the final, Jessica Pegula, the world number 3, playing in front of a home crowd, chasing her 12th career title. For different puzzles, for different styles of tennis, and Eala solved every single one of them. Then came the final, and it very nearly didn't happen the way anyone expected. Pegula took the first set 6-4, playing with the composure of a player who had been in this position many times before. But then the rain came. A storm rolled into Washington and the match was suspended, with Pegula still ahead. It wasn't just delayed for a few minutes, it was pushed all the way into the next day. Eala later admitted it turned into what she called a crazy 24 hours, saying she'd warmed up what felt like 1,000 times while waiting for the skies to clear. When play resumed the next day, something had shifted. Eala came out and completely flipped the match. She took the second set 6-4 to level it, then absolutely dismantled Pegula in the third, winning it 6-0 and dropping just 8 points along the way. 9 straight games. That's how she finished it. Alex Eala, 21 years old, was a WTA champion, the first player from the Philippines in history to win a WTA Tour singles title. It's the kind of moment an athlete waits an entire career for. Manny Pacquiao, the boxing legend and a national icon in his own right, publicly congratulated her, calling her the country's new champion. Filipino flags filled the stands. It was, by every measure, the single greatest week of her career. And then, almost before she could process it, it was over. Because 2 days later, she had to be on a different continent, in a different country, walking onto a different court. This is the part of the story that gets skipped over in most of the headlines, but it might be the most important part of all. Winning a title doesn't come with a pause button. There's no week off to celebrate. There's no gentle re-entry back into competition. For Eala, victory in Washington on a Monday meant a flight, a new hotel, media obligations, physical recovery, and then a first-round match at the Canadian Open in Toronto just 2 days later. And waiting for her, there was a player who already knew exactly how to hurt her. Her name is Alycia Parks, a powerful American player, ranked outside the top 70 at the time, but dangerous on any given day. She holds a share of the record for the fastest serve in US Open history, clocked at 129 miles per hour. And back in January 2026, at the Australian Open, Parks and Eala had played each other for the very first time. That match went about as badly as it possibly could have for Eala, after an incredible start. She won the first set 6-0, total domination, and then it all came apart. Parks stormed back to win the second set 6-3, and then took the third set 6-2 to complete the comeback and send Eala out in the first round. Tennis players don't forget results like that. Patterns like that stay with you. So when the draw for Toronto was released and Eala saw Alycia Parks' name next to hers in the first round, it wasn't just another match. It was a rematch of a result that had already gone wrong once. And this time, she'd be playing it on almost no rest, carrying the physical and emotional weight of the most important week of her life, in front of a crowd that had shown up specifically to see her, because that's the other thing that had changed. In Melbourne, back in January, Eala had been an underdog nobody was watching closely. In Toronto, she was suddenly the story of the tournament. The match was moved to a bigger court to accommodate the demand. Filipino flags packed Sobeys Stadium. Fans chanted, "Laban, Alex," meaning fight, between every point. The atmosphere, by multiple accounts, felt less like an opening round WTA 1000 match and more like a home crowd cheering on a national team. That kind of support can lift a player, can also raise the stakes of every single point. So the match began, and almost immediately, the ghost of Melbourne appeared again. Eala came out dominant, just like she had against Parks the first time. She broke serve early, held her own comfortably, and reeled off 5 straight games to close out the opening set 6-1 in just over half an hour. Parks, for all her power, was hitting aces but couldn't find consistency from the baseline, piling up unforced errors as Eala controlled the rallies. For a set, it looked like a formality. It looked like the Washington celebration was simply going to continue in a new city. Then Parks did exactly what she'd done in Melbourne. She settled. She started landing her big serve. She began dictating points instead of chasing them. And slowly, painfully, the match began to slip away from Eala. Parks broke through, held her nerve, and took the second set 6-4. 1 set apiece. And suddenly, everyone watching had the exact same thought at the exact same time. This is Melbourne all over again. Think about what Eala was carrying into that third set. Physical fatigue from a title run that had ended in a marathon, rain-interrupted final barely 2 days earlier. The emotional come-down that always follows an enormous high. The added pressure of playing in front of a crowd that now expected her to win, not just hoped she might. And the specific, personal memory of the exact same opponent doing the exact same thing to her 7 months earlier. If there was ever a moment for the pattern to repeat itself, this was it. But something different happened this time. Eala didn't unravel. She didn't spend the third set chasing the ghost of the perfect first set, trying to recreate something that had already disappeared. She reset. She adjusted. And she began, point by point, game by game, to take back control of the match. Not through one single spectacular shot, but through a string of composed, disciplined decisions when the pressure was at its highest. She broke serve early in the decider. She held. She broke again. Game by game, she pulled away, and by the end, She had won the final 4 games of the third set to close it out 6-2. Final score: 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. Alex Eala, advancing to the third round of the National Bank Open, and in doing so, avenging the exact loss that had haunted her since January. The symmetry is almost impossible to ignore. In Melbourne, Parks won that deciding set 6-2 to complete her comeback. In Toronto, Eala won the deciding set 6-2 to make sure it never got the chance to happen again. Same scoreline, completely opposite meaning. Afterward, Eala didn't downplay what the moment meant. Emotional in her on-court interview, she thanked the crowd directly, telling them she felt like Toronto was becoming an extension of the celebration that started in Washington, and thanking her fellow Filipinos for showing up for her, week after week, wherever she goes. But strip away the emotion for a second, and look at what this result actually tells you. A title tells you a player can reach the top for one incredible week. It doesn't tell you what happens next. The truly difficult test, the one very few young athletes pass on their first try, is what happens when the celebration ends and the very next opponent already knows exactly how to beat you. Eala had already shown at Wimbledon that she could rise to the occasion on the biggest stage in the sport. She'd already shown in Washington that she could outthink and outlast 5 different elite opponents in a single week. What Toronto proved was something else entirely, that she could take a gut punch of a second set against an opponent who had beaten her this exact way before and refused to let the old pattern win again. That's not luck. That's not just talent. That's the beginning of what separates a player who has one great week from a player who is going to be dangerous for years. Her run in Toronto continued from there, with a clash against fellow American Katie McNally next up in the third round, as Eala pushed to extend a hard-court winning streak that, by that point, had reached 6 straight matches dating back to the start of her Washington title run. The bigger picture is what makes this story worth telling. In the space of about 1 month, Alex Eala beat a defending Wimbledon champion to make history at the All-England club, then beat 5 ranked opponents in a single week to become the first Filipino WTA singles champion ever, and then, with almost no time to breathe, walked into a rematch against the one player who already knew how to break her and beat the pattern that had beaten her before. 3 completely different tests. 3 completely different kinds of pressure. And in each one, a 21-year-old from Quezon City found a way through. The scouting reports on her are only going to get more detailed from here. The expectations, especially back home in the Philippines, are only going to get louder. But if Toronto proved anything, it's that Alex Eala doesn't need perfect circumstances to win. She needed to walk out onto a court 2 days after the greatest moment of her career, face the one player who already knew her weakness, watch her opening dominance slip away for a second time, and find a different ending anyway. That's the story behind the scoreline. Washington gave her a trophy. Toronto gave her proof that the trophy wasn't the end of anything. It was the start of a much bigger question about just how far this run can go. So let us know in the comments, what impressed you more, the run through Washington, or the way she answered Alycia Parks in Toronto? And if you want to be here for whatever Alex Eala does next, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is only getting started.